I'm Wendy.
Hi, I'm Miranda.
And we're with Grit Plus Gumption Farmstead. We created a YouTube channel to just have conversations about all things surrounding trauma and healing. So we're really glad you're here. What are we going to talk about? So today we're jumping into an article that was actually referred to us by one of our favorite content creators that talks about domestic violence. You can find her on TikTok and Instagram at Say It Louder For Me. She's a huge advocate for domestic violence. On our social media, we make content to talk about all things that are either current events or just different things that are going around that's sometimes controversial. And one of the things that we were talking about is the term reactive abuse, and how this is one of the terms that it needs another word. That content creator referred this article to us, and we're going to talk about it today. The article is actually entitled, Isn't reactive abuse just victim blaming?
Yeah, which is a loaded question. It's a big question.
It is. The short answer is yes.
Yeah. And I am super appreciative that she brought it up because, I mean, initially when I thought about the term, it made sense. Like I didn't have any questions as to whether or not it is the term that should be used.
And I think, now more than ever, people are realizing that vocabulary is really important. The way that we name things, things that we call other things is so important. And it's not just about like political correctness. It's about using the right language to create a safe community. And having the word abuse in there does make it seem like you are an abuser. When in a case of reactive abuse, like the term around it is that when you are being abused, you react in a certain way, going to one of our trauma responses, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And if you react in a way like you're fighting back, then that can be considered abuse. And where it gets cloudy is when you're involving law enforcement, which sometimes you have to. Mm-hmm. In the article, it talks about how law enforcement, their primary goal is to see who the main aggressor is. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they end up arresting both. And that's not helpful.
Yeah.
Especially as like a survivor of abuse, that's not going to be helpful for me or my family and my kids. It also shuts a lot of doors as far as like getting help and getting to like domestic shelters or gaining financial assistance, things like that. It really shuts the door to those things.
Yeah, I think in the article too, it talks about, usually one party is the aggressor. You're not usually the abuser and the victim at the same time. So being able to differentiate for law enforcement and to be able to show like, hey, I'm the victim here, I fought back, is super important.
Yes. And you never want it to get to the place of having to be that bad. But like if you have been abused like consistently, and you finally get to the point where you're trying to just save your own life, that's not abuse at all. But your abuser will use that as a manipulation tactic or tool to make it okay.
Yeah.
To blame you, to shift blame.
Yeah. It's you touched me first argument.
Yes.
You initiated the contact.
So a perfect example of that would be like in my situation. If my abuser was in my face, like yelling at me, spitting at me, whatever he would do to try to he'd be the aggressor in the situation. And I push him to get him away from me, because if someone is coming at you, at your face, like your initial reaction is going to be to push. But then if his reaction to that push is violence back towards me, then I'm not the abuser in that case. I didn't start it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of times the abuser will manipulate law enforcement or someone they're telling the story to make it seem like you made first contact. But I don't think that in that case, the push qualifies as abuse.
No. And like it says in this article too, is like, there's not both abusers and both victims. Mm-hmm. There's couples that fight violently. Mm-hmm. But typically there's an aggressor and a victim, an abuser and a victim in those cases.
Yeah. Another thing I loved about this article was there's a section. It's just one tiny little line, and I feel like it says so much. Who is afraid of the other in the situation? And I think that's so important because, an abuser all day can say, well, you pushed first or you laid hands first. But there was no hesitation in their fight back. Once that happened. You are scared and trying to get away from them, and then they respond back. And I don't think in that situation, I mean, maybe it's difficult for law enforcement to differentiate who's telling the truth and what's going on, but yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Who is the one with fear here?
And you'd even talked about how that, like, the chain of events there is like an open door, right? The abuser sees that as, now I can justify my actions in fighting back because they touched me first or whatnot. A great example of that last year was the Gabby Petito video. There was a viral video that went around when cops were called to the situation. She's losing it, like hyperventilating, crying, upset. He's cool as a cucumber. But right away, the cops are targeting her. Like, ma'am, if you don't calm down, we're going to have to arrest you. Which, what? Like, makes no sense. Like, obviously, these people were not trauma informed, which, again, completely escapes me. And he's cool as a cucumber. Like, I'm immediately looking at you, bro. Like
way too calm for the situation.
You're way too calm for this situation.
Yeah.
Like the cold calculation, manipulation, which total failing on this law enforcement department.
And I think that's hard. I mean, I think it's hard in some ways, but like you said, being trauma informed is so important because the normal average person, I don't think sees that. They see calm and crazy. And it's just, that's just not always the story.
In this article, I'm going to read you the exact way that she worded it. By the way, like we said, it's actually an Ask Amanda column by domesticshelters.org. She says, an abuser will try to claim reactive abuse when the survivor fights back or defends themselves, sometimes claiming that the victim is mentally unstable or crazy and reacted through physical violence. How many times, as a survivor of intimate partner violence, have we been called crazy or mentally unstable?
Oh my gosh.
I mean, I should put that on my business card, obviously.
And it brings me back to a situation or multiple situations for me because I've never been one to react by hitting necessarily, but I know that I've been in situations where I have been so manipulated or abused in other fashions that my reaction is to block, like, you're gonna stop treating me like this and I'm gonna keep you here. Like, I don't even know if that's a thing, but someone has treated me wrong to a point where I'm being crazy, asking them, like, why would you treat me like this, and trying to make them talk to me. But then I look like the person that's not letting you leave, not letting you have space, not allowing you that freedom. But here I am 5 years into a relationship where I've been made to feel crazy, mentally unstable, like, and me addressing the things that I've gone through is a problem for you, like, and you want to escape that.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Well, and one of the things that they talk about as in the article about tools and tactics and manipulation was the silent treatment.
Yes, which is huge. That's like a huge
super toxic way of treating people.
Yes.
And as someone who was raised on the silent treatment, I can tell you this is a huge trigger for me. Like, you need to communicate with me because, like, I need that.
Yeah.
I need something.
That's always been my crazy trigger, if you will, when you push me to a point and then decide you're going to withdraw.
Yes, exactly. Not a healthy way. Totally different than being like, you know what? I'm getting too upset in this moment. I need to walk away. that's a healthy way of doing that. But just like cold face, stone cold, just nothing.
And if it is something, I feel like there have been times where I've been told, I mean, literal sentence was, "Do you think your tears mean anything to me?" Like, and thinking back on that and being like, you pushed me to this and now it's nothing for you.
Yeah.
Like, now you're fine. I'm not, but I'm crazy. Like, it's a,
because you're the one having a normal emotion.
Yeah. But
I mean, I immediately think of that video again with like him being, and I don't remember the perpetrator's name because it's not, let's say it's not important. But because I feel like we need to elevate the victims' names more than the perpetrators. Anyway, but just immediately seeing this man has no emotion on him at all. That's disturbing. That's real Hannibal Lecter vibes right there.
It is. I think it's normal to have emotional reactions, especially somebody that you're, intimately involved with and, have love for, care for. And it is not normal to not have a reaction. Like, even in his case, it would be more normal for him to be angry if she did something to him than it is to be calm.
And everyone's anger looks different.
This is true. That's true.
Some is not like, I'm a very dramatic, over the top person. Like that's who I am. Where like, if my husband's angry, you're probably not going to know, or it's just going to be really quiet. And everybody's anger comes out differently. But if I'm recognizing zero emotion on you right away, I'm already concerned.
Yeah. Because even in those moments where somebody does display anger by quietness, there is still a noticeable tension. And I love, we talk about the Adam Young podcast a lot, and he talks about being able to read somebody else's affect. And there's a great episode on mind mapping with a gentleman's name I can't remember, but that you can read someone without them having to use words. And so in that case, you are able to look at your husband and go, "Oh, you're real mad right now," and it's not something that's hard for you to see. Whereas someone who's calm and totally just non-emotional, that's different. And it could, to someone who's just arriving and does not have the ability to map you, doesn't see that.
And wouldn't you think it would be a good idea for them to have that sort of training?
Yeah, absolutely.
When your job is to interact with the public, there's so many things that we talk about too, is like trusting your gut. Of course, we're taught and for generations like not to trust your gut, and if you're taught in the church, you're like, the gut is your flesh and you don't trust your flesh and all those toxic things. But if we started teaching people to trust that, one of them had to have been like, this guy is creepy or whatever. Or they could have been triggered by something that she was, and just not being able to process their own emotions in that moment. Because that's a tough job to be able to show up and be like, no, I have to assess this situation that's obviously a mess, but I'm just going to go off of logic instead of intuitiveness. It's not the right word there, but you know what I mean? Instead of like, oh, one's calm and one's being irrational, then obviously she's in the wrong.
Yeah. And I think too, in that case, and probably a lot of cases too, they're younger. Like, I don't know if that had something to do with it either, but I look at that and I'm like, they were, I don't remember how old, but like teens, early 20s maybe. And, I think we as like communal society think, okay, well, like when you're young, you're just not as mature. Like you may do this, especially women, girls, like are thought of as to be more dramatic or more emotionally responsive. And so I don't know how that could play into it,
and that's such a negative thing in our society too. Like, oh, women are emotional. Well, not all women, and that's not a bad thing. In fact, if anyone is not an emotional person, I have more concern about that than if they are.
Yeah.
Speaking as a truly emotional person.
Yes.
Another thing they talk about in this article that I found really interesting is how we all know that as a survivor of abuse, the victim always tends to blame themselves.
Yes.
Right? Like we always thought as children growing up, the reason our mother doesn't pay attention to us, doesn't give us the love and affection that we know that other kids get is obviously something's inherently wrong with me. So using the term reactive abuse is victim blaming, and it's also reaffirming to the victim that they're the one to blame. I mean, automatically in these types of situations, if say me and Miranda get into it and like she's in my face and she's screaming at me and I'm a hitter. Like I'm gonna come out like rah, like my go-to is fight, like but I will push. We could talk more about the pushing too, but like push her away. And then if she hits me, I don't know why I'm using you as an example.
It wouldn't work because I would play dead. Like
that full possum.
Yes,
like,
absolutely.
Okay, this happens right away. I think I deserve to be hit by you because I did something. And maybe the like thing that I did was like push. Immediately think I shouldn't have done that. I should have reacted differently. But it reminds me of, okay, in high school, I went to high school in Houston, and I always describe our high school as a very well-run prison where we got to go home at the end of the day. Like tons of guards, like we had 5 assistant principals, like they're all on walkie-talkies. I mean, like do we have metal detectors or anything? Although we should have. But like, it was just a very well-run prison. And one of the rules, and it's like, in the handbook or whatever, is like, if you participate in a fight at all, you were suspended, period, in ISS.
Yes.
And I was like, so I'm just supposed to get my butt beat and like just lay there? Like I might die, but at least I won't get in trouble. I was like, please, like I'm not going to start a fight with nobody. I was only 4'11" all through high school. So keeping my head down. What kind of logic is that? Now, if it's, who threw the first punch? Maybe, but again, in this situation, like we're talking about, like maybe the aggressor didn't throw the first punch. And is it a punch? Is it a shove? Like there's so many things there that I was like, this law for this prison is really wrong.
Yeah, and it's unfair. Was the intention of the push to hurt, or was the intention of the push to escape
harm,
attack and harm?
Yeah, so we talked about that earlier, how like even in the animal kingdom, like dogs just don't go at each other, right? There's always like a little bit of like a nudge or something to be like
back off.
Exactly.
Back off.
Exactly. So even the push naturally is, I need you out of my space. You're in my bubble, like I need you. And maybe I'm just pushing you like this, but I have to use my strength because you're bigger than me. Or, if your abuser is, opposite sex or whatnot, then like you're using more force, but also like you're probably getting really angry as well. And you have a right to be. And the thing that she talks about later in this article is like, okay, so what do I do? Like, sure, we've talked about all the different things and like the injustice of it all, but when push comes to shove, literally
alive is better.
Alive is better.
Yeah.
She said 100%. And if you both end up in jail, hopefully, Lord willing, like you'll get through these court proceedings and they'll realize that you're the victim, not the abuser.
Yeah.
But again, with our justice system, we really have to roll the dice with that. But alive is better.
Yeah.
Again, that only all this like confusion and things that are up in the air with like how's law enforcement going to show up for you. It's like the main reason that as victims we don't call the police because we could be arrested, we could end up in jail, we let them off, we don't press charges. I mean, like so many things are just lined up against us.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I just think about all the different, ways that law enforcement responds to any situation. Like, I know that they go through an academy. I know that there's some form of training, but obviously, we're missing something because there is not a uniform response. I mean, even in regular traffic stops, much less a domestic situation where they have to come out and assess like, you'll see videos and things uploaded to social media. Some cops come out and they're immediately aggressive as well. What do you think that does to the victim in the situation?
Escalates the situation.
Yeah.
Every
So.
single time. Me and my husband have talked about that a lot. Like some people just come in as the aggressor, and that's never a good idea.
Yeah.
It's always a good idea to come in as a person who's going to de-escalate the situation, be the calm in the storm.
Mm-hmm.
Is totally within like their window of tolerance, and like regulating their emotions and just showing up as a full and present human being. And just, yeah, there's so much gap there.
Yeah.
We were talking about that earlier. How we realize that so many people are not trauma informed.
Mm-hmm.
So many areas of profession do need that, but specifically law enforcement.
Yeah, absolutely. There should be no reason that I feel like an officer walks into a situation, an aggressive, hostile situation, continuing on the aggression. I understand that most of the time I hear people on the other side, they're saying, well, they walk in with fear because something could happen to them, and but also,
but that's the job.
I know that's part of it.
Me and Matt talk about that all the time. Like, did you not know when you signed up for that job? My husband's a firefighter, so like he knows part of the job is going into a fire, if there is one, and taking people out of the fire. That's part of the job. That's the job you signed up for, bro. Okay. A police officer, you should probably know you're probably going to get shot.
Well, and another
at least
word,
once in your career.
Yeah. Another word that police officers has is peace officer. Like, how are you going to go into a situation supposedly being someone who is to keep the peace,
Mm-hmm.
but you're
agitating it.
Yes.
Poking the bear.
Yeah.
Or like, I saw a video just the other day of like this guy's walking down the street, and immediately they come after him and like start, messing with him and like saying things to his face. And thank God this guy was like totally in control of himself, but like that could have gone bad. And like, whose fault is it then?
Mm-hmm.
You're like poking the bear. Like it's almost like that's a manipulation.
It is. Yeah.
As well. It's definitely an abuse of power.
Yeah.
Which we see that a lot in sexual exploitation survivors as well. So across the board, there needs to be just more trauma informed put into curriculums and stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
Which is something that we want to do. We want to teach trauma informed classes. Call us. Well, this is a great conversation as usual. Thank you guys for joining us. You can follow us on social.
Yep, at Grit Plus Gumption. We have our Instagram and TikTok, and you can message us on there, get in contact with us.
And you can visit our website, gritplusgumption.org, if you want to find out a little bit more about what we do. See you guys next time.
Bye.